You're listening to the Perth Property Show, Australia's only weekly property podcast by West Australian experts for West Australian listeners. Catch your latest episode every Monday at 7 a.m.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Perth Property Show. My name's Trent, Fleskens, your host as always, and we're going to crack straight into a regional property market update. I can't believe it's May already, but it's a good time to go down into the regions, to be honest. Beautiful time of year to be in the regions in WA.
Yep.
And a good time to get an update from our main man, Brendon Ptolomey, on what's happening in the various and colourful parts of our state.
Cheers, Trent. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, reminder that Heron White's got a large number of offices around WA, and we're travelling all over WA every single day of the week because of the work we do for our banking type clients and all of our private clients as well. It gives us good insight in terms of what's happening on the ground in most of these towns that we'll talk about.
Where were you going to start, Cal? Let's start in Cal.
Yeah, cool. We can start out there.
We never start in Cal.
Yeah, we usually hug to the coast, don't we?
Yeah.
Just like most West Australians, but the sand gropers love the sound of the coast. So, yeah, really still a healthy market going on out in Kalgoorlie, and really just need to take a step back when I'm saying these are healthy markets. We're talking about some of the most significant activity we've seen in some of these regional locations in a whole generation, and that probably typifies what's going on in Cal in terms of the local activity, i.e. locals buying their own product, upgrading houses, investing in their own market, looking for rental options for their workers or colleagues or family members, right through to investors coming to town and looking for better quality yields or higher yields than they would get in any other regional town in either all of Australia or in WA. Obviously, the economy there in Cal is still really strong in terms of a factor that we see in HW valuations. The local economy impact still really healthy in Kalgoorlie, and a lot of money flowing through there. A couple of things that we probably haven't seen affect the market in a negative way, and that would be some mining worker type accommodation, what's happening. That hasn't had any downward effect on values. And then the other thing would be just supply into the marketplace. So there's some builders, as you've talked about, Trent, in the past in Cal, that are very good at what they do, and they have been supplying the market, and all of that supply has been soaked up and values are holding up into the future up there.
Do you know the highest selling real estate agent in WA is in Cal? It's Elliot Bryars.
Yeah, I remember listening to your Elliot's podcast with you. It's just absolutely fantastic.
He was a rookie 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Now he's selling the most properties in the state.
Yeah,
and he's a freaking awesome guy as well.
It's just
that's probably the magic, to be honest. Be a good fella.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And I remember him talking about communication and honesty in that podcast. And just short of even just being in real estate, just listening to him and his story about getting himself organised is quite inspirational from a leadership point of view of anyone that's out there that's thinking about, I've got to get my career organised and set some goals. That was a really good chat. Yeah.
So as long as this gold price and lithium prices keep cracking on, there's really not a lot of downward risk in Cal right now.
Yeah, and look around at the fundamentals and go, what would have to change to make this go backwards or drop through the floor or crash in some way? And
we have seen the gold price drop a bit in the last couple of months. And as you said, Cal hasn't dropped itself. It's not like it's been super sensitive to that.
No, it hasn't this time around. And it feels a little bit different. I know that things will probably go back to the old ways at some point in time, but it's very difficult to see what that factor is at this right now. While there is uncertainty in the world, you'd expect the gold price to hold up.
So that last sentence.
And while there is uncertainty in the world, you'd expect the gold price to hold up into the future, which should underpin that marketplace.
That's
and
a very
the
good
investment
point.
there. Yeah.
Let's go to Albany.
Yeah, so Albany's and Denmark region down there still really undersupplied. Unlike Cal, they're not as fast at building new accommodation down there. The people that put their money into or physically put their houses into the short-term accommodation market are still achieving good returns, and so there's no reason for them to return those properties to the permanent accommodation marketplace. And until that happens, that's probably one of the factors. Until that happens, I can't see numbers down there going backwards. And the other part here is just that longer term lifestyle change that has been affected in those two locations, in particular Albany and Denmark on that south coast. People that moved there, it's not like they moved there and went, oh, this is not a nice place to live. They moved there and went, wow, I've made a great decision. And how do I get deeper involvement in this town? Do I build a house now, or do I move to a lifestyle property in the edge of town, or do I set up a small business or a hobby farm or something like that? Yeah, there's still very positive signs down there, and still really difficult to construct in terms of the supply of labour in that marketplace as well.
As a bit of a yardstick, Is the feeling like it's stronger than Perth's market, or weaker, or the same?
I'd say it's probably just more difficult, and by that I mean it's constrained more significantly in land supply and has higher construction cost growth than probably the average location in Perth. Yeah.
So it's just more friction in the market, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
And as long as there's demand, people going. If there's no demand, the friction is just irrelevant, right?
Yep.
It's harder to do business, but there's enough options. Take your time, take your pick.
Yep.
But when you don't have those freedoms, those liberties, then it starts to make a difference, is what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let's go to Dunsborough.
Yeah, so Dunsborough holiday market in terms of kind of mid-tier to prestige is still really healthy.
Is it white hot? Is it red hot? Is it on the boil?
Oh, look, I think that you would get pretty good interest for a good option in terms of a $2 to $4 million lifestyle holiday house down there would get pretty significant interest at this point in time. And the reason for that...
You're not saying white hot?
No, it's not white hot, I don't think.
So
you still get good interest.
Down a bit, but still strong.
There's still value increase there, number one. Let's just be really clear about that. And it's still a very saleable product, but I don't think you're getting offers first day like it was. But having said all of that, that marketplace is very much driven by how much capital is sitting around in Perth and the western suburbs, and the capital growth in those locations and the significant earnings profile in those locations mean that if you've got the right product down there in that value range, you're going to get a lot of interest, in particular if it's well set up.
So there's no downside weakness that's coming in terms of this trend, or it's more just a moderation of growth? What is the feel on Dunsborough? Because it's a bit of a canary in the coal mine for Perth, given that it reflects the money in the western suburbs, which is the canary in the coal mine for the rest of the state.
So the upper end of that market down there, I can't see anyone needing to walk around and sell a property really quickly. Now, I know this is going to sound really tangential, but in doing catch-ups with my national colleagues, we started to hear some stories from agents in other capital cities, and for confidentiality reasons, I won't go into where, but essentially the agent coming back to our valuer when the property was under offer at a price lower than we thought it was worth. Essentially, the agent's feedback was, wow, these people overextended themselves. They'd spent $2.5 million on a couple of different properties, and they realised they needed to get rid of this one really quickly. And they thought they were going to flip it for 10% above what they bought it, and they got surprised by the fact that they couldn't do that. And that's the kind of scenario that I think that we'd be alarmed about in Dunsborough. We're not seeing anything like that. Any discussion with any of the agents we talk to, any of the brokers we talk to down there about the concept that anyone would have to quit property to sort out their financial position.
What's Bunbury looking like?
Yeah, Bunbury's still really healthy in terms of, let's just remember that we came off some really low bases in some of those Carey Park, Withers, those types of locations. Those value levels will hold to where they've gone to, really because of the same fundamentals that we talk about in demand and supply across Perth. There's still lots of people that want to get into that market. Probably buyer agents have left the area a bit, means that owner-occupiers can be one of the offers in that location, or even
what
local
are we paying in Bunbury now for your standard 4x2 or 3x1?
So in those Carey Park, Withers areas, so Withers at the lower end of the range, probably at $500,000. Carey Park, you're getting up into those 6s and 7s probably.
So there's still a discount on Perth, and that's probably the fundamental proposition for Bunbury, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the plays in Perth at the moment, because we have had such massive value growth, would be to cash out of your place here, in particular if it's principal place of residence, and you might have a retiree type option in the southwest, in particular in a value proposition like a Bunbury. Collie's seen a little bit of that, like a little bit of rural change into maybe a Harvey or somewhere like that down south as well. Yeah.
Okay. Do we have to go north to Geraldton?
The activity is still really healthy there, Trent. And number one, let's again remember we came off must have been one of the lowest bases in the country. We had investors coming into those locations like Spalding and saying, can I buy a house on a big block? We're talking nearly 1,000 square metre block of land, admittedly an old 3x1, but that would be less than $200,000. And obviously they've doubled in value in this cycle uplift. I go back to the comment about Kalgoorlie. The local economic activity at Geraldton is still really healthy. The money's being invested for lots of different reasons. There are a few different things going on up there. And whilst that sentiment remains positive, I expect that market to remain positive.
I'm just waiting for it.
You want me to walk in here one day?
That says a lot about where the weakest parts of our property market sit. Yep. And again, it's a bit of a canary in the coal mine from the other side. It's when you start to see the real weakness. If you start to see a bit of jitters in Armidale, in Byford, in Geraldton, in Kalgoorlie, South Headland, that's when you go, oh, what's happening here?
Yeah, and so one of my lead indicators there would be exactly what you're discussing. We have a large number of people that bought into those locations that you just mentioned through buyer agents that may be local to WA or East Coast. Now, the thing that's holding all of this up is that rents are still really healthy, vacancy rates are still really low, and whilst they are able to pay the mortgage on that investment property, I would expect that you would hold the property. Mainly at this point in time, number one, you're paying your mortgage. Number two, it makes tax sense to do that. And number three, there's no indication that the value of the property is going to drop away. We have heard murmurs and rumours of inquiry to people like property managers saying, what should I do now? Should I sell my property? And it's funny that in relaying that story, the property manager was saying to us, we think they're inexperienced investors. They don't understand what they got in for, because you don't just sell your residential investment property at the first sign of any trouble. So, yeah, look, we'll wait to see whether the canary in the coal mine starts chirping, but we're still relatively confident that values will hold up here in those locations that we've talked about, and Gero's on that list.
All right, let's head to Karratha if we can.
Yeah, K-Town. I got some headlines up there, mate.
Tell me.
$2.7 million record price for a house.
What sort of house is going for 2.7 million? I know there are some nice, beautiful houses on 700-800 square metres in Karratha. Bainton West, this is where you'd expect to see 1.5 maybe for a nice house. But what are you getting for 2.7 mil? Who has a house big enough to justify 2.7 mil?
Yeah, so it was Bainton, you're correct, and it is on the Pilbara News. It must be fact. Look, I think it's probably a case of the vendor setting a really high expectation, the products meeting the purchaser's requirements. I would expect it's large 4x2 with some fantastic outdoor areas. Hopefully it's got a pool and it would have a big shed to store the toys in. And I would expect that it was in the right place at the right time. It would also be a big block of land up there. Now, I haven't gone through the actual sale and looked at the details of that, so I'm speculating on some of that. Interestingly, there's a couple of $2 million sales, one of them $2.1 million for a renovated, really well-presented home in Millers Wells as well. And that just underpins the fact that there's some other sales in the location, and we love that as valuers to have some sales evidence in the area. Yeah, really interesting. There's really low levels of good stock in the location is what our valuer up there is reporting. Rents are really holding up, which again goes back to that concept of the investors will keep holding because they're still getting their cash flow, still able to make their repayments. The negative gearing's probably still working well for them. And the rent side of things, some of them up as much as 10% the last 6 months or so in terms of getting some rental increase. And there is a little bit of urgency around that marketplace in terms of people trying to buy in. And again, the locals love to sell and buy and hold through there and make some money. As an example, that I'd expect that 2.1 renovated home is probably someone local that bought it, renovated it and flipped it and made some money on the way through.
It's probably coming from the basis of what is clearly a very stubborn iron ore price. So many analysts have been picking that iron ore price would be down at 70 by now.
Yeah.
And it's still at 105.
Yep. Yeah, and just sheer demand for accommodation in a location like that. We've talked about it on and off for a long period of time, but the Karratha of today is a lifestyle opportunity for people to live in. It's become a very livable Pilbara city. That was the goal back in the day when Brendan Grills started that planning program and invested the state government money in that location, and it worked out really well. And so that with that becoming a destination or an acceptable place to live for families, that means that the demand goes up, and unfortunately the supply can't keep up with it.
Let's finish in Headland.
A lot of turnover in the Headland location, and probably a mix of investors just changing their profile of property, but also owner-occupiers moving around as well. Interestingly, there's minimal value growth, so potentially what the investors are seeing there is, okay, the value growth's topped out, I might get out of that property and get into something else. Rents are still really healthy. They'll hold up for a period of time. They're not going up as quickly as they have been in K-Town, but let's just remember perspective here. So when I'm talking to my valuer about how the activity's going in there and there's turnover, and most properties are selling within 2 weeks. So they're selling at a good price within 2 weeks. It's just not the FOMO market that we're seeing in the other regional locations in Perth Metro.
I wonder if that's what Perth ends up being in a couple of years. Just a solid, not a lot of growth, but everything's moving fairly well market. That's what my downside reality of Perth looks like at the end of this decade, Brendo.
Yeah, and it's a really good point, because I think that we've undergone a step change here in values where I think of it a little bit like Sydney. If you look at the suburbs that people want to live in within close range of the CBD, whether it's along the coast or in the circumference around Sydney on the harbour and those types of locations, those properties have settled at values in the order of $3 to $5 million for a single residential home, and that's just where they'll sit for a long period of time. They're not going to collapse again. The stats in totality might talk about a median house price index going backwards in Sydney by 0.2%, but those houses still transact at those numbers.
0.2 is coming from the weaker parts of the market. It's not really impacting your eastern suburbs.
Yeah, and so if you think about something that's worth anywhere between $1.5 and $5 million in Perth at this point in time, it's probably going to settle down at that number for a fair amount of time into the future.
Bonus round, Broome.
Yeah, really interesting observation of our valuers up in Broome town, just coming into their peak season or starting their peak season right about now, that there's really good demand or higher demand for smaller, more modern homes. So you're talking about, say, a 130 to 150 odd square metre, 3 or 4 by 2 on a 3 to 4, 500 square metre block tops. The demand for those is outstripping the demand for the older, larger homes. So 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 180 odd square metre houses on, say, 700 square metre block of land. It's really interesting that the market is trumping for the... Essentially, I'm thinking here something that doesn't need any repairs, maintenance, update, doesn't need tradie attention. So I'll take the lower maintenance, lock and leave type option that I don't have to spend any money on versus the older house that's bigger and will require some money or my time spent on it to do it up. Yep.
It probably talks to a critical mass of product out in Broome getting to its end of life.
Yeah,
and becoming really unlivable for a lot of younger people who will go up there and go, I'm not putting up with this. I'll pay a bit more for something a little bit cleaner. And also just a reflection of the Perth market, for example. Younger people aren't wanting much of a backyard either.
Yeah, and it might be the odd downsizer too. I'll get out of the bigger place. I don't want to spend time here maintaining my home. I'll buy the neater, tidier, smaller product that I need into the future, and I can lock and leave when I need to.
Is it still the only market in WA that we talk about that has weakness?
Yeah, look, there's some new land coming on the market in there. Obviously, there's an issue in terms of trying to build in that marketplace. But yeah, it's probably still a little bit shaky, and it probably reflects that remote location in the Pilbara.
Brendo, thanks so much, mate, for your time. Really appreciate the regional update.
Cheers, Trent. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Perth Property Show. If you've only just joined the conversation, you can catch up by heading over to our website, perthpropertyshow.com.au, subscribing to the podcast, or joining our Facebook page. Don't forget to tune in next Monday at 7 a.m. for more expert insights, local analysis, and suburb spotlights. Happy hunting!